Good evening. Design Review Board 2 public meeting of July 30th, 2009 is called to order. Please refrain from talking amongst yourselves during the meeting, and please turn off or put on vibrate all cell phones and pagers. If you need to talk, please leave the meeting room. Anyone who wishes to speak, including applicants, is asked to completely fill out one of the speaker's cards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff. You'll be called to present a case or speak on a specific item as desired. Anyone who wishes to be re-noticed about a project must completely fill out one of the postcards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff to receive review of subsequent meetings. Current DRB agendas are available by calling our DRB hotline at 818-548-3171 or by visiting our website at www.ci.glendale.ca.us. A handout describing the procedures of the meeting, possible board decisions, and DRB reconsideration and appeals is available at the table by the front door. Please note that appeals must be filed within 15 calendar days of the DRB decision date. The chairperson may reorder agenda items at his or her discretion, and roll call. Mr. Baladian.
Here.
Mr. Garagos.
Here.
Mr. Malikian.
Here.
Ms. Sakai.
Here.
Mr. Zarifian. Absent. Report regarding posting of the agenda. The agenda for this meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside of City Hall at or before 5 p.m. on July 23rd of 2009. Oral communications. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak on an item not a part of this agenda? Any cards?
We don't have any cards.
Okay. Then we are on to the review calendar. We have no staff announcements.
Okay. Should we talk about the North Glendale Community Plan Advisory now, or should we leave it off to the end?
At your pleasure, Mr. Chairman.
Let's go ahead and do that right now and get it over with so that everybody's present. I've been asked to represent Board 2 to join the advisory committee, and Mr. Zarifian is going to be accompanying me as part of the two board members from our Board 2, and I don't know if you want to kind of elaborate on that.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As many people in North Glendale know, there's been a great deal of discussion over the past 6 months regarding North Glendale design standards, zoning standards, overall planning policies. And in June, the council gave the planning department the okay to assemble an advisory committee that would work on some of the more problematic issues. That's a committee is approximately 30 to 40 people, made up mostly of members of the community, of the homeowners association, business groups in North Glendale. And we had extended to the commissions that planning department staffs, the two design review boards, our planning commission, historic preservation commission, asked that the chairs of those various commissions would join this committee. And in the case of the DRBs, the two DRBs and the Planning Commission, we asked that the second member be available. So those committee meetings will be starting actually this coming Monday on August 3rd and be meeting every other week through October. Information about those committees and their work schedule and what they'll be doing, their recommendations, will be posted on the city's website under North Glendale Community Plan, with the thought that an expectation they'll make a recommendation to City Council probably in November. So we look forward to having Mr. Zarifian and Malekian join us on Monday.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so then let's move on to the board business. The first one, 2 PDR 2009-034A, 1123 Raymond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. As you mentioned, the first case is 2 PDR 2009-034A, located at 1123 Raymond Avenue. The proposal is to construct a new 1,349 square foot second unit at the back of the lot, while also replacing the existing detached garage with a new attached garage to the front unit, also doing some renovations to the facade and the roof, mainly the roof pitch of the existing front unit. The project is exempt from CEQA, and it's located in the R2250 zone, medium-density residential. I should also mention for the record that there was a variance granted on June 19 of 2009, to provide less than the required 25-foot turning radius for the 2 parking spaces that will be attached to the front unit. The house was built in 1992, and it was reviewed by the historic preservation planner and has been determined that it's not a potential historic resource. The proposal also includes changing out the existing windows of the front unit as part of the facade renovation, which are vinyl today, and I believe they were put in illegally because we could not find any permits for it. So those will be also replaced to be consistent throughout with the proposed unit, which will have double glazed insulated fiberglass windows, which would be set in wood trim. Let's see, there will also be a, if I'm not mistaken, wood seal, but I'll have the designer address that if it comes up. Staff recommends an approval of the project with 3 main conditions. One is to provide decorative driveway and decorative pavement for the space between the 2 garages that would be abutting the common outdoor space. Second one is to wrap the stone veneer around the front of the unit, of the front unit, to go all around, because as you can see in the elevation drawings, it does not have the stone veneer at the front of the front unit. And third is to provide additional fenestration at the southwest elevation of the front unit.
So let me ask you this.
Yes.
Are we reviewing the back and the front?
In a way, we are, because as we have been meeting with the designer and the homeowner, their goal also was to have a project or a lot with 2 houses that are consistent together. Because the existing house had other issues as well, including the front porch, which was too big, and it was some
So there,
time in the past
I mean, that's
enlarged.
why
That's why it's smaller today, and the roof pitch is sort of off, and they're willing to change that to make it consistent with the back unit, which is the newer unit. They wanted to have 2 units that are consistent together. So we would be reviewing both, yes. Would you like me to go over the draft record of decision, or do you want to hold it for the end?
Let's hold off on that until the record of decision.
All right, then, in that case, that concludes my presentation. If you have questions, I'm here, and the designer's in the audience as well.
Okay, and let's go ahead and open the hearing. Greg Misakian. Can you state your name and address, please?
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Greg Misakian. Address is 6277 Van Nuys Boulevard, Suite 118, Van Nuys, California, 91401. We have no objective to the recommendations. I have already made the changes on the recommendations for the conditions as far as the front unit, the veneer on the front unit, and to provide a more landscape driveway, to provide decorative driveway. If you don't mind, if I can give you a copy.
Just hand it to the planner.
So it's not stapled. And we are open to any recommendations just to get an approval with conditions.
Question.
Yes.
The roof on the front unit had to be raised to be consistent, or it had to be raised for some other reason?
Right now, it's a low-pitch roof, so we want to raise it to sort of to match with the rear proposed unit.
And that roof is the volume in the front?
Yes, that's
In the
correct.
west elevation, it's the larger volume. That's the roof that you're raising up?
That's correct.
And that's also the reason why the porch in the front is going away?
The
porch
porch in the
If I
front.
may jump in, the porch is out in the setback area. That's a zoning concern. That's why we, actually during the zoning administrators hearing for the variance, that was brought up, and it was mentioned that it should be reduced to meet this front setback.
So the size that it is now, is that the largest it can get on that side, or can it go?
You mean
Can it
lengthwise?
get bigger?
It needs to average out, though, to 23 feet. If it can, I don't know if the designer has done the proper calculations to figure that out, but it was really encroaching into the front setback when we asked them to cut it back. As far as the length, I don't know if it will or not be able to do it. The designer will have to do the calculations and let us know.
As far as the changing the roof, you're removing all the roof of the existing and replacing with a new raised roof, correct?
That's correct.
And your proposed rear garage addition, I don't have information on the existing, where the walls are or anything. Are you removing any walls, or are you...
From the existing unit?
Right.
Yes, we do. And the existing garage is a detached garage, which we have to demolish. And
My recommendation, the 50% rule kicks in, so you better make sure that you maintain all the
roof.
the 50%, just look into the code requirements. The planner that is helping you is fully aware of this situation, so
Yes.
just be fully aware of that. So I guess we're going to comment on the front unit and the rear unit.
That's correct.
Okay. Any more questions?
I did clarify the front porch. It needs to be reduced from what it is?
Yes.
So will they have some left? I mean, they'll actually be...
What you see in the elevation drawings is what they can have.
That's the,
And what's out there, which is provided in the photos, is much larger.
Because the elevation he's showing now is 6 or 7 feet, is that right?
That's correct. That's the maximum I can have.
That's the most you can have now?
Yeah,
Okay.
based on average.
But being an existing non-conforming condition
It would have been the case, but we could not find permits for it. And I
for the
did.
front porch.
Yes, I did make several site visits, and it did look like it was added later. And some older site plans I was able to look at, some roof plans did not include that portion.
Okay.
It was determined that it was done illegally at some point in the
Okay.
past.
Thank you. Any more questions?
So I have two questions. Windows, types of windows, the renderings, is it reflected? I mean, I see, are we going to use a slider?
Some sliders and some single hang windows, but there will be fiberglass windows
Okay.
with the wood veneer.
So it's going to be combination of slider and, okay. And then kind of the rendering, kind of it's the entrance area, the roof design, I don't know, it's the 3D, it's kind of, I don't know if, I'm not clear.
The second floor overlaps the door.
It's not, I don't know, I'm not, maybe you need to,
This right here is a cantilever.
Yeah, cantilevers.
over here
Full
too.
cantilever.
So it's kind of the,
Yeah.
we need to look at.
And the roof, that's we need to look at it. I'm not that crazy about it.
Maybe we can continue.
Continue, yeah, we'll
let's
discuss.
discuss a little bit more. Would you like to? Mike?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I don't see major problems with it. I'm just, as I was looking at it from before, I'm actually wondering how the board feels also. It almost seems like if it was flipped, you had sort of an entrance porch, you would then see that down the driveway from the street, rather than kind of just getting a glimpse of the side of the garage. You know, if that plan just flipped. And wondering what you guys feel about that, if that's strong enough. I mean, I think then, at least when you look down the driveway, you'd see what could be a sort of a porch element off the front door. And that might-
Are we talking about the rear unit?
The rear unit, yeah. Or just the garage sliding up and the door happens on the bottom, whatever. I mean, you flip the unit, basically.
Well, I sort of liked how it is now because you have like a private entry, but I don't understand why there's so much landscaping in front, why you can't make that area bigger. Is that another requirement, that you have to have 10 feet of landscaping along the side there?
Let's wait until Mike finishes, and then you can continue. Are you done, Mike?
It was that, and then just like the same thing about that entry on the back unit. It just seems like you could bring a lower roof element forward a little bit more so there would be a porch. And I think that will clarify kind of the funniness that's happening with the roof structure. Also, I just forgot to ask clarification for what the window surround was. And that wasn't, but if that was stuck over, it was a wood element. And that was it.
Okay.
Well, I was just tying into what Mike was saying about the entry area, that for me, it doesn't bother me that it's on the left side where it's kind of a private entry, but I would like to see more of an entry element, like you were saying, like it's not just this little, tucked in the corner. And so I don't know why there's such landscaping has to be along the edge of this area here.
That would be the common outdoor space, which has a minimum requirement of having 10-foot dimension. Because they have to have a 200 square foot outdoor common outdoor space per unit. That would be 400 square foot for the two units. And that 400 square foot has to have a minimum of 10-foot dimension by, in this case, 40.
So I also didn't understand the recycling and the trash area on the front unit being all the way in the back where it's sort of inaccessible because you have the doors, the front door, and then you have a door out of the bedroom in the back. So you're saying that the person has to go through the bedroom, through the private outdoor area, past the garage, around the garage, to throw the trash away.
So it would be...
So why can't that be the common outdoor area and move the trash recycling to the other side where it's more convenient to the living kitchen area?
I see your point.
And also, I don't see them going through the bedroom to to throw things away. That kind of confused me. These two kind of don't mesh together. I do like the design of the back unit much more than the front unit, which confuses me. But I guess it's existing, so we'll leave it at that. And I also had an issue with the roof on the setback unit over the entry. That kind of just didn't quite look quite right. And then the new front unit entry to me just doesn't seem substantial enough. But you're saying that's the biggest the porch can be, so then that's where we're stuck.
Well,
with
from
that.
what we have been provided, because I did have this conversation, and I told them, you can go as big as the code allows you if you want,
Yeah.
as long as it works with your design. And apparently that's the biggest they could go.
Okay. Maybe if we just made the columns beefier so that they engage the ground and maybe wrap the stone around the columns so it feels like it's more substantial. And that's about it for me.
It's a rafters. Go ahead.
Well, as far as the design of the overall design, I think it's a simple design, so I don't have a problem with that. I think my issue with what it's being proposed is more of the details and how it's kind of brought the whole thing together. As far as site planning, I don't necessarily mind the flipping. I think they need to, it'll be good for them to consider flipping the back unit, only because you got the private outdoor space, could utilize the south-facing sun versus the north-facing sun, and I think it would work better, knowing that, the plans are drawn upside down, but, so that may come into play at some level, maybe that's something that we can discuss on that. As far as the front building, I think the porch needs to have, I agree, I think it needs to have some sort of a little bit more presence, and maybe, as you said, beefier columns or something there that kind of represents more of a porch rather than just a pair of sticks holding up a roof. So I think as that gets developed a little bit more, I think it will definitely become a lot better entry point. As far as the back unit, the plans, I didn't get any sections, so I'm not sure, the porch is full height or anything, but when you're dealing with the simple detailed drawings, I mean, you hardly have any kind of details. You have wood siding, stucco, and stone, and all of that, when you start looking and putting it together, I think how the connections come together, I think that's important. You got areas like this. What happens to that? You got a flat roof here, and I'm not sure if where the floor line is, because we don't have any dimension as far as floor to floor. So I'm not able to kind of address this condition where you have this flat line coming out there. Is the floor line here? I mean, are they thinking of putting it here? But I don't know. This condition, I think it needs to have a little bit more effect, and maybe that, as we talked, maybe a roof with a kind of a trellis or something that kind of represents the entry point, or anything, it doesn't matter, but as long as that's addressed, then you start getting into these asymmetrical conditions. The building sits off to the side, we have the roof on the side, and, I mean, these things do play a huge role of how this thing is presented. As Jean-Pierre mentioned, the windows, you got a double hung, you got a slider, you got a casement. I think all of those play a role. As far as the details of the stone, how this stone detail comes together, that's important. Randomly placing the shutters, I think that needs to be addressed also. So overall, I think it's a simple design. I don't have a problem with it. But as far as how it's detailed is where it falls apart. So I think get it to a level that you want it to be, and by the time, what I'm afraid of is by the time it's done, by the time the engineering is done, the construction is done, the design is going to be substantially different than what you're seeing on this sketch model. So giving the more information, it will help substantially in the long run.
If I may jump in, I do have a section of the...
Oh, you do?
Do you want me to put it up
Yeah,
quickly
can
for
I
you?
see that? If you guys have anything,
So between the window and the stone veneer, you see it's too close.
yeah, and I
detail.
mean, just details. I think it's a simple design. It's a very simple design, which I kind of like. I think it helps, but
It's not
everything
complete.
else is just too simple. I think it's just a little bit
Sorry.
more of a thought that needs to go into it.
That one has to matter.
Okay. So you got different contradicting conditions there. In this one, I'm assuming this is where this overhang is. You have a roof over this, but then this is pushed over. There's flat area here, and then you got this flat portion that it's sticking out. I think that needs to somehow get addressed. again, but overall, I'm fine with it, except, I'm not sure once you start incorporating all these and pulling all those whole things together, if it's going to work as nice as it needs to be. That's my comment.
Just to address one of your comments, it is in one of staff's recommendation to add a stone cap at the top, on top of the veneer.
Right.
I don't know if that will help with the transitioning from stone
Well, that's
to
one of the
stucco.
details which I agree, and I agree that, the front, the stone need to be carried, and which he was kind enough to adjust that and bring that over. Again, if we're okay with the front, I'm fine with it, as long as, I think it needs to have a little bit more
prominent entrance.
prominent
Also,
entrance.
also the veneer, you have to make sure the height of the veneer in relation to the window height. See where the stone is meeting, all the way it's butting to the sill. I think that will be creating, you need to have some kind of the detailing.
Space between the
Yeah,
two?
space, or if you're gonna, I agree, provide some cap for terminating, but where's that cap terminate? Right below the sill, that way you have a cleaner detail.
So would you say a couple of inch space between the two would be sufficient enough, or?
I don't know, how much would you give, 6 inch? I don't know, how high is that? 4 feet? It's pretty high, actually. There's no,
You also...
the veneers.
Yeah. You're talking about the siding, right? Or the veneer?
The veneer
Okay,
right
yeah.
now.
Okay.
The height of the veneer.
You have a 3'4". Yeah, there's a dimension of 3'4" on the elevation.
Maybe you need to reduce that.
And the elevations that we have versus the rendering, they have a little bit of contradicting details. On the rendering, which is not going to be used as part of your construction set, but on your elevations, you have the siding wrapping around all around it, whereas on your elevation, you only have siding and only in the front, and yet you're showing stucco on the face of the other side. So that I would recommend the siding to wrap around, follow the rendering.
The siding on the second floor we're talking about, or the stone
Well,
veneer?
right above this,
Front
the
door.
way it's showing is on the renderings, see how the siding comes around and goes back? On the elevation, there's no siding here, so they're only showing siding here.
So you would rather that the siding ends at the inside
the
corner?
way
It
that
wraps.
this is rendered is fine.
Okay.
The way it's rendered, it's fine, it's just the elevation needs
The
to
three
reflect.
sides of the projection.
Yeah, so terminate at the inside corner. The first.
Exactly the way that it's rendered.
Okay.
So even the elevations that are rendered are fine. It starts off here, and it goes in the front, and then it wraps back on the side. So this is fine.
Okay.
Except, on on the elevations, it doesn't show that.
All right.
Are the
Make a note of
rafters
that.
going to be, it's a stuccoed or exposed, what,
The rafters,
the roof rafters and all that?
I will not be able to comment on that. They're not going to be exposed according to the.
Are you going to be
So you mean the soffit under
the soffit?
Yeah. You also, the plans have a lot of contradicting dimensions. You don't, the dimensions, I could not follow, I was trying to follow the plan and how the plan relate to the ground versus the upper floor to understand what your elevation is about, and trying to come to some sort of understanding of which governs, but the dimensions don't kind of line up, particularly in the front. So I'm not really sure if the upper bedroom is kind of sitting over, or they're sitting in line with the garage wall. It's sitting back a little bit, so that you need to clear. All I'm trying to do is make sure that your plans are completed the way that you're going to construct it, because the construction starts, you guys make decisions, and you realize that it's not the way you want it, and all hell breaks loose. The other consideration is you created this entry, which I think, again, creates some sort of a presence, but maybe you want to even add a window here, or something It's a family room, it's just a sheer wall, so I think nice little window there to, even a, you know, a Juliet balcony or something, anything to kind of brings and maybe add some sort of a support under that flat overhang there.
Also, one more thing it would help too, I think. As a consideration, maybe an accent color where the panels are. The panels maybe will soften instead of having all painted the same color. Maybe as a consider to introduce a little accent color.
We're talking about the siding?
The sidings, the panels, siding panels. The garage door, consider a different color, give a little bit, match the door color. Like Alan said, maybe the entrance, extend that roof with the porch, expose, give a more entrance. Maybe the door you might have to center it. The plan is too offset to the side. Maybe you should center that double door to the center. That's it.
For the last part, if I may ask
The
for
door, the entrance door?
clarification of the rear unit?
As a consideration,
These are all rear.
Yes.
consider to
Shift it
center,
to the left a little.
center it to the wall. It's right now. It's like shifted to the side, the double door. Consider to move it to the center.
Well, or how about just a single door with a side light? We need a double door? Because it doesn't seem like it's very tight to the right, but he's trying to address that the entryway is to the right because of the 10-foot setback, which we all think is kind of too much anyway, and we need to have a porch area. If we just had one door and then kind of
With a side light?
with a side light to kind of make it more of a presence. And I still think that the trellis or a roof element over that area is necessary to give it more presence. Well, I wanted to also talk about the new proposed driveway as concrete and grass. My experience with grass inside a lot of this concrete is that it'll die because it's very hot. So my recommendation would be to put gravel in between. I like the permeability of the concrete, and that's a good idea to break it up. But you probably want to just stay away from planting it because you'll never keep it alive.
Could we also make that back common area, we actually make it wider so that we could take some dimension off of 40, which would let them do sort of a porch area, more of a front covered porch for the back unit? It seems like it could get wider, right? Almost to the side of, or closer to the side of the garage, or maybe another foot, which would let us take maybe 5 feet off of the 40. You with me on that?
But yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, that could work.
That way,
But I don't think
it
it will be a problem to have a trellis over the common outdoor area anyways. I'm looking at Roger.
Oh, could you have a porch? Could you have a porch column in that common area, or would that be a
Because he's
problem?
going to have a problem with
That would be for
As
shading
long as it
purposes.
complies with setback, lot coverage.
It wouldn't take away from the common area top.
No.
Okay, if that was the case, then that's fine.
I think it would be better.
Good idea.
Okay. Well, can we hear the...
Yes. All right, so the first comment I heard was about the windows, and Mr. Bellotti mentioned something, that to try to stick with at least, or at most, 2 types of windows, preferably 1. If it's going to be sliders, just keep them all sliders. Let's see, and another one that Mr. Bellotti mentioned was the stone veneer. After the stone cap is put, there should be a space between the window sill and the stone veneer.
Okay, before you go on for the first one, is it consideration or condition?
Condition.
Condition, okay.
To put that as a condition.
So the
okay.
second one, lowering it.
So would
Condition.
that's also a condition to lower the stone veneer with the stone cap and leave space between.
Can I
Okay.
can I step in here for a second? So the first condition would be simplify the window schedule.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Okay. But you don't care whether it's all sliders, all casements, all
Just be consistent.
be consistent. Okay.
I would suggest we phrase that as consistent type of window operation. That's
That's better.
Unless you...
And then I heard a consideration from Mr. Garagos about mirroring the rear unit. And
Yeah, just be consideration.
just a consideration to mirror the rear unit, okay?
To make one comment, while we're talking about windows, I think because there is siding, it would probably want to be a painted surround as opposed to a stucco surround. So it could be any material it wants to be. It could be manufactured material, but I think it would want to be a painted window surround. So that would be a condition.
So windows surround shall be painted wood?
Wood or manufactured product.
Okay, and there was also, I also heard almost all of you mention about the entrance of the rear unit, and it should be more emphasized, perhaps have a trellis or a roof over it. And Mr. Malikian also added, adding perhaps a window above it to,
In addition
to the
right.
porch or the roof area above the rear entrance.
I think the entry piece would be a condition. The window could be a consideration.
Okay.
They could just extend that lower roof forward
Yeah.
and then put a
And
porch.
put a post.
Put a post on it
Yeah.
and make a porch out of it.
Make a
So-
porch.
It'd be nice.
And then,
I'm sorry if I may interrupt. The specifics of how they actually accomplish making a porch, whether it's a trellis or the chair had mentioned Juliet balcony, are you okay leaving that something we can work, staff can work out with the applicant, so long as they emphasize the front entrance?
Yeah.
And then there was also mention about the entrance of the front unit and the columns that should be probably beefed up a little more, since we have space restrictions and can't get bigger than what it is, at least to perhaps look into options of beefing up the columns to put more emphasis.
Again, I think it might be nice if it was a painted detail to give a contrast to the stuff.
columns?
Probably do the stonage you had mentioned. On
The
lower
columns?
porch.
Right.
Okay.
If you wanted to do the lower stone, you had mentioned that. so.
Yeah. I think it needs to be, it has to have more prominence, that entry piece, porch.
The consideration might be to do siding in the upper gable on the entry like you're doing in the back unit. In the upper gable of the porch.
So making that front unit, the entry more substantial is a condition.
Yes.
And then Mr. Kai also mentioned about the access to the common outdoor space from the front unit and perhaps relocating the trash area and creating a direct access instead of going around through the driveway to the common outdoor space. Would that be a condition or a consideration?
They can actually put a door in the garage and just go through the garage, and so
Well,
that could be one solution. But
through the bedroom?
Yeah, you can't do it from the bedroom.
I think the layout of the front unit is really quite strange to me. I don't understand some of these wall placement choice, like the kitchen. Why would you put an entry into the hallway? Why not put it into the living room? You have the front entry door. You can look right through to the back bedroom. The garage is far from the living space. I just don't understand the front unit at all. But if it is what it is, then we're not going to change it. But I'd like to make it, I guess, a consideration, because if I can't move it, then, it's not.
Yeah, you might want a door from the garage into the private outdoor.
I think that bathroom probably, I'm not going to design that bathroom where behind the kitchen, near a little work over there, and have access from the garage through that private outdoor area, like a porch, connecting to the kitchen area. Like a little walk, trellis type, and then flip that bathroom the other way around. But,
I would even flip the private outdoor area to the other side. So it's
we can
yeah.
design it.
It's bunch of
So
problems.
it would be a consideration to
Consideration.
create a more direct access to the common outdoor area. Okay, let's see, what else do I have here? Okay, and then the transitions between the first and second floors that was brought forward by Mr. Malikian, and you pointed out on specific corners. Did you have any major concerns with those, or just considerations to look into them?
a lack of detail of the drawings, I start questioning those. So,
Would you like the applicant to provide details where those differing materials meet for staff to look at, make sure they're appropriate?
I think so. I think you need it for construction anyway, so might as
Okay.
well be part of the.
Okay. And then Ms. Sakai also mentioned about the grass in the driveway, and you mentioned that grass will probably not survive too long, and
It's just
gravel
a
is
recommendation.
better choice. And that was a recommendation to consider, not as a condition?
Correct.
Good.
Well, if they can put it in if they want, it's just going to die.
And I also heard something about the accent color on the sidings. Was this a condition or a...
We can
John Perry, do you want to do
talk
this?
about it. Yeah, I think Mr. Buladian is a good point to say, you know.
I just noticed maybe as a consideration lighting while it proposing giving all those revision as request for lighting for the exterior.
Lighting?
Lighting,
Like
the sconces around the building. Or
Okay. As
Done tastefully and
to
matches
be also
the-
not only
consistent
functional, but
with
as
the
an
design.
architectural
Yeah.
detail as well?
Yeah,
Okay.
lighting is missing. Maybe we
Okay.
need to review.
So that would be for staff to review. You'll be comfortable with that for staff to review?
Yeah, what type of lighting and all that.
Okay.
The design and
A lot of things are missing from the back.
And then the accent color,
This,
was that a consideration or a condition for the
I
accent
think
color?
the accent color is in the shutters, and then you could use that accent color on the windows. Like I said, the garage door, I think that would be a good place to use an accent color and
That's
have
a
the, have the
consideration.
garage door match
Consideration.
the entrance doors.
So to use the same color of the shutters or the garage door and...
Well, I'm
And
just
the
saying
door.
that the shutters could be a color, the garage door should match the front door, and that could be a different color, or it could be
Okay.
wood, stained wood, or something that matches, that's consistent. I actually kind of like the idea that the siding matches the stucco, so it's not too broken up. That you have just, you know,
And also the
volumes.
entry door of the rear unit, the board mentioned something while moving it to the side and centering it with the wall. Was this also a condition?
I think what he was
Or an
trying to
alternative
do,
was
I
to...
know what he's trying to do. I think what he's trying to do is the overhang, the pop-out. I think what he's trying to do is trying to center the door with the pop-out on the second floor. So that's why he's kind of pushed this to the side so that it's covered under the overhang. But I think once you design that front entry piece and then that passageway,
Might
I
help
think it
to-
may help to shift those doors, and rather than being all the way to the side and you have this extra wall there, not off-center, so I think it becomes too separated, and you can go ahead and do that.
And we heard two options, either to center it or use a single door with the sideline.
Well, I think that way you can get it centered on that upper overhang volume, and then
I just feel that without knowing what they're doing, what they're going to be doing on that overhang, the canopy, how they're going to cover it, if it's just going to be completely covered with the roof or it's going to be open, that you can actually walk and see what the volume is up above, then you start relating those two. But if it's covered, then you're not going to have that relationship, so then you can definitely move that to the center.
well, then let's say if there is a visual relationship, then the door should be centered on that upper volume unit, and then
Maybe
it goes
case,
to a
yeah.
single door if they can't fit
It's
a
just
double
the
door.
elevations
I
are
think
not-
once he introduced the
agree
rooftop,
with you.
he's going to need to shift it to the center. I mean,
So what I have here is to shift
needs
the door
for
to work with the newly proposed entry porch.
I
I think he's going to end up moving it to the center because he needs room for the trim, the jam, and all that. If he needs to put some sconces on either or one side of the entrance door or on this side, I think he's probably going to do it. He's going to move it to the center.
Okay.
If I may make a suggestion, I think the chair was headed down the right road of sort of folding that comment into the overall comment about doing something with the front entrance, whether it's a trellis or a porch, and we can work with the applicant to position the door properly. We've
Right.
heard you,
Yeah.
Mr. Beladian, and your concerns on that.
And that covers everything
Your condition.
I think I've heard. So
Mr. Beladian had one more. I think it was probably a consideration. Consider a lighter color for the facade of the building. Just
Yeah,
in general.
let him as a consideration, or introducing a different accent color too.
Either
both.
way.
Both
Okay, both.
as a
Both are
consideration.
considerations. Okay.
okay.
and we have a motion.
You're the man.
I'll make a motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
A
we have
motion to what?
To approve the,
All those things he said.
motion to approve the design with the conditions.
And
with conditions and the
Comments.
considerations and the comments. Okay, this will be a roll call. Ms. Sakai,
Yes.
Mr. Boladian,
Yes.
Mr. Gergos.
Yes.
Chairman Malikian.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 4-0.
Are you ready for the next one?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Prior to presenting 2-PDR 2009-035/A located at 3617 Roselawn Avenue, staff just would like to announce that 12 correspondences had been received via email in opposition, primarily raising concerns with the proposed architectural style and compatibility with the new facade design with the neighborhood.
And do we all receive those and we had a chance to read them, right?
Yes.
So, okay, all right.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Now I'll just continue with staff's presentation provided within the staff report provided at the table behind me. The project resides in the zone R1 low-density residential. The CEQA status for this project is exempt. This is the first-time submittal for the board's review. The project description is to construct a 311-square-foot first-floor addition located at the front of the house and a 212-square-foot addition located at the rear yard. This project also includes to change the facade and remodel the existing minimal traditional style single-family residence with an updated, more contemporary style. The existing property is developed with a 1,320-square-foot one-story single-family residence built in 1940 with an existing 289-square-foot detached two-car garage. The property is relatively flat, an interior lot, and regularly shaped. The subject lot is surrounded by other properties with similar characteristics in regards to lot size, topography, house size, and landscape features. To discuss site planning, the expansion will total 523 square feet of new floor area. There will be minor reduction of the landscaping at the front and the rear yard due to the addition. However, areas occupied by hardscape shall be reduced to comply with zoning code's minimum requirement of 40% during zoning plan check. However, overall, the site planning of the project will match well with the existing house in its location, configuration, and overall site planning. The mass and scale for the project. The roof ridge of the additions will be approximately 17 feet 10 inches in height and is approximately 3 feet higher than the roof ridge of the existing areas with a gable roof design that faces north and south elevations. As conditioned, the proposed addition is appropriate in terms of mass and scale. Staff recommends the height of the additions to be slightly reduced to further reduce the visual mass. Onto architectural style, the project proposes to integrate prevalent characteristics such as the single-story building height, windows of quality material, asphalt shingles to produce a consistent overall look and similar visual characteristics of the immediate neighborhood. The other features provided in this project include a new entryway with a metal sloping roof, a stained wood door surrounded by glass windows, a metal fascia sunscreen canopies above the new wood, and aluminum-clad casement windows which face Roselawn Avenue. The selected materials, textures, and architectural details appear to be harmonious with the immediate neighborhood. However, the height of the additions have been conditioned to be reduced 18 to 24 inches to further decrease the mass, as previously mentioned in the staff report and my section in regards to mass and scale. Also, to reduce the two front windows to additionally further reduce the mass and the bulk of the appearance. On to staff's recommendation. Overall, staff recommends approval of the proposed project with the following conditions. Condition number 1, the height of the addition should be slightly reduced 18 to 24 inches to decrease the visual mass of the project. Condition number 2, reduce the overall size of the 2 front windows to visually reduce the mass and bulk of the appearance. Condition number 3, the applicant should consider using smooth stucco instead of textured stucco. Condition number 4, newly landscaped areas are to be planted with native or drought-tolerant grasses, ground covers, shrubs, and trees. And condition number 5, areas occupied by hardscape shall be reduced to comply with zoning code's minimum landscape requirement of 40% during the plan check process. This concludes the presentation. The homeowner slash architect is available, and I'm available for the questions.
Thank you. Okay, we don't have a card for the applicant. You're not going to talk about the project? Never had that before. So I guess the applicant.
Do you have any questions or anything of him?
We'll just hold off if we have any questions. Okay. Then, is it Andrea Hamburger?
You have copies of the letter from our homeowners association?
Absolutely.
You do?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me just.
Second page.
I have more copies, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, we read
Yeah,
it.
Okay, I'm Andrea Humberger. I live a couple of blocks away from this site, and I'm also representing the Montrose Verdugo City Spar Heights Neighborhood Association. I guess if you've read my letter, I don't need to read it all. Basically, while we agree with some of the staff recommendations, we disagree with the parts of the staff report which finds that the proposed addition, front addition, is compatible with the neighborhood. In fact, we have serious concerns about the project's incompatibility with the neighborhood in terms of the mass scale, height, style, fenestration, roof line, and finishes of the front addition, and its inconsistency with the original house. We're also concerned about the fact that it was reviewed in terms of its relationship to Verdugo City while the house is located in Spar Heights. And I understand that in talking to the staff planner that the map for those areas maybe draws the line down Rose Lawn.
I'm going to have
I would like
Mr. Loomis explain a little bit, talk after you're done, so he'll go ahead and talk about that.
I would just like to suggest that that line should be drawn behind those houses facing Rose Lawn, because clearly the two sides of Rose Lawn are part of Spar Heights. So, again, Verdugo City, I think, is a little bit different place from Spar Heights, which is a pretty cohesive subdivision, and, many of us hope that one day it'll be a historic district. So, again, and that doesn't imply that we don't, we're against modern additions. I mean, certainly houses can be modernized, but this house, or this proposed addition is very much out of keeping. What we did is we tried to go through the design guidelines, the city's design neighborhood guidelines, and try to cite, the areas that we think, where we think the design has gone wrong. Basically, we talked about an addition of a second story. It should be stepped back. I know this isn't a second story, but this is a taller front addition. The front addition is taller than the house itself. It's like the opposite of what the intent of the guideline is. So I would just suggest that, if they can't bring that design down, then maybe they need to consider putting a second story that's stepped back, so at least the front of the house retains its, is more in keeping with the rhythm and the patterns of the neighborhood. Again, the fenestration, the height, the front entry, the roof line, almost everything to do with that front addition seems out of keeping with the neighborhood and out of keeping with the house itself. And you can really see how it's not cohesive with the house itself when you look at those side elevations where it's like, these two tall pieces, with this low house, the original house in between. It's just, just very disjointed. And then the last point, we agree with the planner where he recommends, the smooth stucco instead of the texture coat. I guess in keeping with the design guidelines, which say that textures, colors, and materials should be appropriate to the prevailing pattern. So anyway, we just really would like to see this go back to the drawing board, and we appreciate you considering our comments. Thank you.
William Warner.
Good evening. My name is William Warner. I live 2 blocks away from this proposed house, and it is in Spar Heights. It's not in Verduga City, my home, and the applicant's home. I don't know where this map drawn boundary thing is. I've never, ever heard of Spar Heights being in part of Verduga City. But moot point, I'm sure you guys are going to work that out. I don't really understand quite what all design review is supposed to do, but I can tell you some of the obvious things that come to my mind, and I think that's the issue of compatibility. There is no way that this proposed addition to this home is compatible to the Spar Heights neighborhood of homes built in the 1940s, a little later in the 40s, and some built prior to that. It just doesn't fit. You got these 2 large forward-facing boxes that are so obviously out of character. The concept, I think, of design review is compatibility. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of a structure that was built 6 blocks away at the corner of Broadview and Verduga Road. It's a 3 or 4 story medical office building being finished up right now. It is a very modern building, totally out of character to the rest of the area. And I would like to think that this proposed project not go that way. It just doesn't fit in. It's just as simple as that. I think some of the things that Ms. Hamburger has brought up are very valid. I don't see a need for me to comment on that. It's just a compatibility issue. Just isn't there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Ann Jennings.
Good evening. My name is Mary Ann Jennings. I live on Rosemary Avenue, approximately 4 blocks from the proposed remodel at 3617 Roselawn Avenue. The design is neither appropriate nor harmonious with the immediate neighborhood. I've lived in the neighborhood 37 years, and I've become very familiar with the architecture of the neighborhood, and we have a large variety, including all of the second stories that have been added to the homes. And this is not in keeping with any of what has been going on in the neighborhood with remodels. The proposed architecture is not compatible with the Spar Heights neighborhood. I find it difficult to imagine where this design might be compatible. Maybe Disneyland or some other theme park, but definitely not the Spar Heights neighborhood. A metal facade roof blended with asphalt shingles. This does not work toward the goal of breaking down the roof into separate volumes, thereby decreasing the apparent massing. This is probably the worst design I have seen presented to the City of Glendale. Even if the height of the addition were to be decreased, the result still would not be sensitive nor complement the immediate neighborhood. How the upper windows on the front walls are to fit into the design are absolutely beyond my understanding. The materials for the windows on the new front facade, the lack of cohesion between front addition and the existing house, use of textured stucco instead of smooth stucco on the front facade, and to mention again the roof materials. My list goes on, as do why I truly believe this needs further evaluation for compatibility. I encourage the Design Review Board, too, to recommend a totally new design, one with less conflicting materials, one with a more cohesiveness to the surrounding area. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the owner would like to respond back, or?
No.
Okay. Then the public session is closed. Would you like to start? Or do you want us to go ahead and then?
Oh, where do you begin?
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to comment on the neighborhood design guidelines before you begin commenting, or also for the public benefit? The neighborhood design guidelines that are often referred to are a draft they were drafted in 1991, and they were done as essentially a kind of survey of the current condition of the neighborhoods, and with fairly limited public input as to how the neighborhood boundaries were drawn. It was really a staff survey that was a beginning of neighborhood guidelines, And in fact, the map is actually rather precisely drawn. In fact, it's very difficult to even ascertain where the boundaries of the neighborhood are. It's an 8.5 by 11 map that covers the entire city. So certainly the residents of Spar Heights, when you look at the street grid, probably it would make sense to adjust the boundary line of what's being called Spar Heights versus Verdugo City. I should also note that these guidelines were never officially adopted by the City Council or by the Design Review Board. But by common practice, since they are what we have for the past 5 years at least, they've really been the touchstone for how we do design review. But given that they are relatively imprecise, speak about neighborhoods in a way that is not up to date with residents' current understanding of neighborhood boundaries and sense of neighborhood is one of the reasons we're starting our community plan process that really will involve neighborhoods and how they understand their neighborhoods. So hopefully as we develop our community plans, we'll begin to correct these problems that we have with our current design guidelines. But they are guidelines, and they are for the board to use in advising their decision, and they're not necessarily bound by them.
Thank you.
Well, initially I thought modern design would be fine to do if it's done sort of in a conservative, modern way. I don't understand the taller volumes. I was looking at the floor plan spacing and what the volumes, the spaces that you're using the volumes to address. Like they're trying to bring in more light, or I don't know if they're trying to just bring in more volume. I also don't understand in the back area where you have the taller volume, why you'd want to make a 212 square foot room twice as high as it would normally be. I do appreciate the generous landing in the front and the entry door window detailing. I think that, to me, is the right direction. But the roof, the small window, the casement window, not casement, the clerestory windows, the roofing, the some of the windows choices along the side. There's just a lot of questionable choices as to why you would do it in that way. So I think also in looking at the context of the neighborhood, this really doesn't fit in with the other styles that I see present in the area. So that's my general, we'll continue on maybe later on.
Thank you.
I don't think it's compatible at all. I think what could be compatible, I mean, this is a historic style, just like modernism is now a historic style. Now, this is sort of an 80s postmodern. Is a lot of the themes that you're working in, the elevation. And that was really all about the shape that you were making something and how it evoked an earlier style. It was a reaction against modernism. That's why it's so funny that the entry door is kind of a wild modernism thing when postmodern was all about, going against that. So I think if you thought about it, I mean, I think you got a little bit of a hurdle because it is Spar Heights and a lot of the homes are within historical styles. So I think if you were to come in with something contemporary, I think it really has to be sensitive to the fact of where it's situated. I mean, the first impact that had on me was it's a dentist's office somewhere in like Encino or something. I mean, that was like the first thing that hit me. I was thinking, wait a second, it's in Spar Heights. It's a house in Spar Heights. That doesn't work with me. So, but I don't necessarily have anything wrong with postmodernism as an idea. But I think if you looked at, there's some great examples of it that I've just completely blanked on.
Michael Graves.
Thank you very much. Michael Graves, but also over in Santa Monica now. Santa Monica. I'm speaking. Anyway.
More Rubel Udell, perhaps?
Yeah. The four names. We wrote the Vegas as Ducks.
Venturi.
Thank you. It just took me a second. Going way back to school days. So there's a lot of really great examples how you do a postmodern house that really evokes what is fundamental about the houses that are around it. And I think you could do something that had that kind of sort of 80s postmodern, but I think you really need to be conscious about how the silhouettes of the other houses work. And I think What you've done is something that might fit more if you were in a tighter cluster of homes, almost like row houses where they kind of line up. And that's not really the situation that's in the house. So, I mean, in the neighborhood. So I have trouble, I can't support it, but I think if you still wanted to go down that route, I think you need to be more sensitive to kind of the area that you're in and the silhouette of the shapes of the homes that are there. Because that is what postmodernism was about. It was about reaction to very stark modern buildings and how do you get the fundamental primary forms that were interesting about the older styles. So, anyway.
My turn. One, I like modern houses. I think the problem with this design is I think it's the presentation. I think the way you present it probably it would have made different if you had approached differently. Like Mr. Giragos said, it reminds me a lot of postmodernism design, Michael Graves projects. I think I don't have any problem with the windows and all that. I kind of like it, but I think what the neighborhood, the compatibility and all that, it's what's taken it away from the design. I think the two towers that you have, it's like it reminds me kind of the first time I looked at it. It reminds me of a birdhouse. I think that's what making it, and the color. I think the two colors. I think it's killing it. I think you should, in my opinion, I think you should have stick to one color. I think it would have toned it down a little bit. It wouldn't drove the neighborhood too crazy with two colors defining that tower. I would tone it down to one color. Maybe you would have made it better, and then maybe you would have considered the roof design to a simpler flat type parapet type wall facing the front. Maybe have a angled roofing facing the inside, not visible from the street. Would have maybe made a better composition. But again, you're the designer, you know better. But again, I think you need to look into a couple of architects like Michael Graves. I think that the color scheme, it's going to make a huge difference in this. If you want to go with the postmodern design, I think the color scheme is going to make a big difference. And you'll see Michael Graves' colors are more in the warmer colors, and maybe a true rendering of this project would have probably helped the board members or the neighborhood understand better your design or your presentation. It's kind of vague, but I could see what you're trying to do. And then maybe the height of that ceiling in the front, maybe you need to knock it down a little bit down. Maybe it's too high. It's almost like 13 feet high. Maybe it's a little bit too high. It's overly. Maybe around 12 would be okay. You need to revisit the height, the proposal. Otherwise, I mean, I like the modern house, but you have to be looking into those and make everyone happy. Your neighbors, you're gonna live with them. Maybe another approach or massaging it a little bit, maybe we'll work it out. That's about it. I don't know.
A lot has been said, and I wish you would come out and defend the project to hear what your thoughts were, but you decided not to, so I guess then we're just going to assume what your thought has been, and we're going to go from there. I'm all for modern architecture. I've said it many times before, but I'm for compatibility. I am for mass scale and the location that the building and project is being proposed. I'm not for outdated architecture. I'm for minimal architecture that represents the neighborhood. There's a lot of different examples of modern architecture that fit within the neighborhood. The materials that are being picked that fit within the woodlands and the spar heights. So I think those are very important. When you propose a modern building, such as a postmodern building within a low-rise, modest homes, and within that neighborhood, I think it is the architect's responsibility to sell the project to the neighborhood and to us in city of Glendale. I think the presentation does not justify the addition of the modern work, and I really don't see how it can be fixed without completely changing it. I know that the architect likes this style of architecture, so for me to come back and say you need to lower this a foot or you need to reduce the size of this window, I think to me the bigger picture is the overall style of the architecture and how it's compatible. Until that is resolved, I cannot really comment on the details. I cannot comment on specifics of the project. I think there's a bigger picture here. I think you're starting with a very modest home, and you've created two massive additions in the front that I personally think it's out of place. So if you are going to take the route of a modern approach to the project, I think I will support it, but I think it needs to be a minimalist. I think materials of wood, stone, sidings, other materials that represent the neighborhood should be used, and I think it needs to be sensitive to the neighborhood. So I mean, I'm not going to go any further than that, but I think that's where I stand, and that's what I think. So
I would want to put something on there next time, especially if it went towards a modern design, that we had some type of streetscape that this elevation would fit in. So I would want that to be a requirement.
I don't know how you would, what direction you would give the architect to. I mean, if...
Yeah, that's beside the point. I was just tossing that one in.
Can't find modern homes every corner.
No, I'm merely just talking about scale, so that people understood how the scale of what was proposed worked with the neighboring homes.
Well, I think you can go modern, like Chair was saying, that you can go modern, but it's more of a compatibility issue. It's
colors,
not going to be a
materials.
postmodern. It's going to be more like a 1950s or 2009 modern.
I don't think it's anyone's position to say yes to modern or no to modern. I think every design needs to be looked at where it's being proposed, how it's being proposed, and what the compatibility is within its neighborhood.
Right.
And so, if the modern approach is taken, I think it needs to be compatible. So
I agree.
I think we come. Charles Moore was who I was thinking of. Anyway,
all these
Or
names are
Udell.
coming back. I
exactly.
shivers.
That's how I was saying. It was like the school days. But if you look at Charles Moore, I mean, he did some really great postmodern homes that have some of the feelings of this and would be completely compatible with the neighborhood. But they would work off of forms that are within that streetscape, and he would go through there and pick out elements of those existing homes, the gable forms and volumes, and consolidate it into a more modern, contemporary view of those older styles.
The tendency right now is, and the trend is in the industry, is that if it goes towards modern or the modern effect look, I think one of the tendency and the trend is that specific style is being used to develop more LEED certified, more efficient green buildings, and thus resulting in using more recyclable materials and other elements there that are put together in a raw form, thus creating this minimalist, clean look that I think it fits within any neighborhood. I think if it's done properly, if it's done well, I think it will fit anywhere. But I think if the project is being proposed of what it would have been proposed in the 80s and of what the trend was at that time, I think there's something there that is missing, and I think it is the architect's responsibility to sell that and say that this is compatible and why it is and how it is. But if we don't hear from him, so then these are the assumptions we need to take.
Also the landscaping too. I mean, makes a big difference.
Yeah.
This type of presentation. The presentation, I think, it's a big.
Well, there's other code issues that I've seen, but I don't know if it's even worth discussing it, such as the front entry piece that is being added. You have an 8-foot driveway or 8-foot clear driveway with the fencing. I don't know if it's even allowed having that. So by the time you're done with the new proposed, then that entire facade, that front elevation is off-center now. Now you have to jog that in, and you see a portion of the existing. So I'm not sure code-wise, I think there's a lot bigger picture than,
Well, the front setback in the R1 zone is 25 feet. There is
But
an
the
existing...
driveway. What's the driveway width? Isn't it 9?
Well, the existing driveway width is 8'4", but I believe I'm going to refer back to the code. If there is an existing 8-foot driveway and it's not used for a pathway, I need to confirm this with the code.
Right.
It might be okay for an expansion.
But not when the new addition comes. I think the new addition needs to meet the minimum code, I think.
I think you actually can add it on at that acceptable lot.
Not that I know.
If there's a...
No, I know the code section for this, though.
I may be wrong, but that's besides the point. I think there are bigger issues here for me and the setback. But
Okay, if I may, just kind of go over what we discussed here. I think it's overall, all the board members have generally just said that a design that's sensitive with the conscious to the immediate neighborhoods in terms of the silhouette, the colors, and the materials that are compatible with the immediate neighborhood. I know Board Member Baladian was talking about maybe using a one color to decrease the tower-like appearance, or the focus of how it was separated and it kind of focused on the tower. Would that be a condition, or is that a consideration? I believe you might have intended that to be a condition.
I think it's a. Yeah.
If I may,
I think we need to discuss. Let's not talk about the conditions.
the board also hasn't made a motion, but I'm.
We're not there yet.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion.
I think Mr. Loomis knows the direction that it's headed. So.
Did I make a motion? Okay.
I second it.
Yes.
Again, a motion to what?
Motion to send back for redesign, 2 PDR 2009-035-A.
I second it.
Okay, this will be roll call.
If I may, before we jump into roll call, there were a number of comments made. My sense is the board didn't want to give too many specific directions for the architect to respond to, but we should give him some direction. And I heard, at least from Mr. Gregoragos, an interest in a streetscape view that may be a condition of the project coming back to help understand the context. So I think it's up for the board to discuss before we vote.
I think before we make any motion or anything, I think the applicant need to be aware of, if the project comes back at the same condition, and if it comes back to us and we do not decide on that the design is set, it will be automatically denied. So I think the applicant should kind of step back and decide on the direction that he wants to take this project. And I kind of sense that the board is trying to return this. I thought that it would go to another direction, but if we are returning it, I think we need to give a very specific point and make a point that if this comes back the way it is, it will not pass. So I think we need to definitely make sure that understands, rather than start talking about specifics, lowering the roof, changing the windows, and I think we just need to make a little bit more of a broader statement, I personally think. I don't know, maybe you guys can...
I think, for me, that would be implied in the motion I made. But
We design a total. No?
Total redesign? Is that what you're saying?
Keeping it the context of the neighborhood, whether it go modern or postmodern or, ranch style, whatever
I think
the
the
style.
applicant
It just
will
doesn't fit with the neighborhood.
should take down all the. I know he didn't defend his design, but I would like to see the applicant next time to come back with all these, take all these comments down, and come back with. I think he's lacking the presentation. I think he's lacking presentation, and the presentation is going to make a big difference, which direction you want to take it. The color, everything. I mean, the colors, the height, overall, the whole design. If you want to stick to modern design or postmodern design, you need to defend that how you want to do it. Also, there's another item. It's vertical versus horizontal. I mean, there's a lot of issues that hasn't been.
I think in just a general comment.
Comment. So I don't know. It has to come back for a redesign, in my opinion.
Are you saying going for denial? Is that what you're saying?
Go with it.
I'm not
almost
saying
there.
anything. I'm just saying that if he comes back the way it is and he kind of massages the windows and heights and here and there, it's not there.
I see Alan's point.
I think it needs a complete redesign, in my opinion.
I agree with that.
But I mean that we can leave it up to him. Either we deny it or we return it with a very specific comment that this project needs to get redesigned. Period. And it needs to be as you mentioned, it needs to be compatible with the. And whatever choice of style of architecture they pick, I think it needs to be consistent with the neighborhood.
Maybe it's easier for us. It's easier to deny it that way. Taking all the consideration, deny it, and come back.
I mean, it would be clearer understanding at that point that it's not massageable.
Yeah.
If that's, I get the point. How will we track my motion?
Well, replay it.
Replay? So,
yeah.
I was going to say, if I could make some suggestions on a kind of broad overview that I think the board is expressing a concern about neighborhood compatibility and to a certain extent suggesting that you're not sold yet on the nature of the forms, the colors, materials, the streetscape, that it is compatible, and you'd like to see more information to help understand the compatibility of the design when it comes back. So I'm, in general, saying that there may be a broad overview that the board is not convinced the project is compatible with the neighborhood. Would like to see further documentation when the project returns, such as streetscapes, montages, maybe materials samples or color samples.
I think as it stands right now, it's very clear it's not compatible. So to me, I mean, I don't know about the board, but to me, I don't think it is. Maybe, as Mr. Balajian said, maybe it's just the way that it's been presented that, maybe it does fit within the heights and the scale and the mass and everything, but to me, I'm not convinced on that. So if the approach is going to be to return this with some more information of what this building is going to look like within the neighborhood and within the context, I'm still not going to be convinced, I think, because I can kind of put two and two together. I see, and I mean, he's been kind enough to, even, I haven't seen this, but he's been kind enough to do a kind of a full scale of, a montage of all the buildings around. So what's there now and what is being presented, it's not really there. So.
Well, it's a pleasure on the board.
What's the difference between denial and return for redesign?
Well, the return for redesign, denial would be is just to let the applicant know that we don't like it. I mean, or return for redesign, we give them the option of going back and redesigning it
Massaging.
and then massaging it, not massaging it.
You know
but
what, even if you deny it, he could come back. I mean, if we deny...
Can I just interject here? This is the first time submittal. You can't deny the project.
Oh,
You can return it for
Okay.
redesign.
okay.
Okay, then we
That was
won't-
my
There we go.
motion. I take my motion
Are you
back.
serious?
Please.
Yes.
I thought we had the...
The second time is.
During the second time.
You led us astray.
This is and your initial review for a final submittal, in which case you have return for redesign as an option to you.
That is my
That way,
original-
he will, if we go for our original motion, then he has the option either to redesign it, right? Or
come
fix
back with
it.
he wants to.
Then
No?
we just have to return for redesign. That's
Okay,
it.
then we're on the right track. Yeah.
Then
I think he probably understood by what we said. our
I'm
feelings.
sure he understood.
He's nodding his head. Of course,
Sure he understood.
we are communicating.
All
We are
right,
communicating.
let's move on.
So I hold to my motion, if anybody wants a
Also
second.
his second.
I second that.
Okay, so I have a motion by Board Member Garagos and a second by Board Member Beladian for return for redesign. This will be, should I repeat maybe the condition? The condition was to maybe come back with a sensitive design in conscious with the silhouette, colors, materials are compatible with the immediate neighborhood. Okay, this will be roll call. Board Member Beladian?
Yes.
Board Member Garagos?
We all doing theatric pauses? Yes.
Board Member Sakai?
Yes.
Reality show you. Lights change.
And Mr. Chair, Malakian.
Yes, with a hesitation.
You have a 4-0 count for return for redesign.
If I may, just sort of commentary, I want to express that the board was saying that modern, postmodern, traditional, any of the style issue was not the primary concern of the board.
Compatibility and scale and mass is the issue.
I was merely giving him thoughts.
We're going to take a
Thoughts to go.
5-minute or 2-minute recess break. Text.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and member of the board. This item before you is the last item for tonight. It is case number 2 PDR 2009-044-A. It's located at 567 Caleb Street. This project was last reviewed by the board back in September 25th, 2008. Since it's been more than 6 months since the last review, this case is considered a new project, and it has a new case number, and it's being submitted for the first time for final review. The project is a proposed.
Before you begin, it's because of they did not pull the permit at the time, so that's why they need to
No,
come
we
back.
denied it last, or we sent it back for redesign last time. It was 6 months since our last
okay,
meeting.
okay.
6 months.
Okay, that's why I wasn't clear. So I thought that they already pulled it and
No.
expired.
If I may jump in, just as we were looking at the code during the recess, under vote for return for redesign, the applicant has 90 days to return the project before it's considered a new case.
Okay.
So the project involves the construction of 2 decks totaling 857 square feet. This does not include any modification to the existing 3-story home that is located on the property right now. The existing property is developed, as I stated, with a single-family resident on a hillside lot that is approximately 11,586 square feet. This is a double frontage lot. Caleb Street wraps around the back of the house as well as at the front. So the location of the decks will not be seen from the front. However, due to the hillside topography, it will be visible from the rear and from the adjoining neighbors below the subject property. The guidelines, the single-family neighborhood guidelines, primarily focuses on additions and new residences. However, given the fact that decks, depending on the size and location, can add mass and affect the site planning, it is the reason why it is before you today. At the last meeting, the board voted to have the project returned for redesign with 4 conditions. And let me just go over some of the main points about this project. The proposed deck will follow the natural topography of the slope and will be situated directly behind the house. Due to the sloping characters of the lot, it will be not visible from the front. As I stated earlier, terracing the decks as proposed is appropriate and sensitive to the hillside characteristic of this lot. Regarding mass and scale, the tiered design of the decks also help in breaking the mass of the project. Previously, the decks were designed to match the existing house in color and materials. This design approach was deemed inappropriate by the board, and since this design approach added perceived mass to the building. The revised project before you has been redesigned to blend with the natural hillside by way of color and materials, and appears to be more compatible with adjoining development and the natural hillside setting. The deck will be finished in hardy plank in combination with split-face block and vertical wrought iron railing. The color scheme mimics the natural color of the hills. The finishes and colors set the deck apart from the house, and the deck appears sensitive to its surrounding due to its color and materials. And the materials appear to be of high quality. At the previous meeting, again, the board voted to impose 4 conditions on the project. These conditions were: 1, the deck should be designed to blend into the hillside rather than match or blend with the house. 2, as appropriate, explore the possibility of using wood, stone, steel, or concrete in the deck construction. The color of the decks should blend into the hillside earth tone and not match the house. 3, explore corrective options to address the condition where the skirt meets the ground as it pertains to drainage and waterproofing. And 4, provide a professional landscape plan prepared by a licensed landscape architect. Based on the project before you, the revised project, the size of the deck remains the same, The configuration and the site planning remain the same. The biggest change, as you can see, is in the color and the material. And behind you is also the landscape plan that was requested by the board. The applicant is proposing to use just two types of material, planting material, which mainly composed of bougainvillea, and along the eastern property line there are some bamboo plants. The revised proposal shows changes that appear consistent with the board condition. Overall, the massing of the project has improved, and it delineates the decks from the massing of the house, and the material and color are successful in blending the decks to the natural surroundings. Staff recommends approval of this project with two conditions. One, appropriate landscaping should be provided on all sides of the decks to further soften the appearance of the deck to properties below it and around it. Two, in lieu of the proposed bamboo due to its invasive growth habit, a different plant material should be used that is consistent with hillside development and hillside landscaping. And with that, I conclude my presentation. The architect and homeowners are here today to speak further about the project.
I have one question. When you say appropriate landscaping on all sides of the deck, are you just saying more of what they're proposing, or are you saying...
It could be a combination of more of what they're proposing, or as if the board see fit, a varied landscape palette that's consistent with the terrain and the hillside environment.
Christopher Compton.
Good evening. I'm Christopher Compton, the applicant for the application 4000 Riverside Drive, Burbank. And I have worked with staff on this project with regard to the comments that the board suggested at the last submittal. We've substantially addressed all of the issues that were brought up. I think the major issue here is that the deck component, the new part that we're adding, is now a separate element from the house in terms of its visual and its massing appearance. We've gone with a neutral palette. We've tried to use materials and colors that we feel will probably camouflage it more than make it an expressive architectural feature on the site. And I think that was the general intent. And I think at this point we have addressed the concerns. We're comfortable with the way the project's done. I do understand that there may be some specific issues related to the landscape architecture. I, as the applicant, will see to it that whatever specific recommendations, if the board has any, that we can have that addressed and get that back to staff for final review and approval. It's appropriate.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions for the architect?
Nope.
No? No. Thank you. Are you okay?
As with last time, I was here last time, and I'm in support of the project. I think you addressed all the stuff we had talked about. I hope the owner will stay the whole time this time, because I was in support of it then and I am now. I'm glad we addressed those items. I think it was just trying to make it feel much more like it was part of the lower landscape areas, a part of the house, and you addressed that. You addressed the resolving of those elements at the ground. So very supportive of the project and would vote for approval with the landscape issues that we'll resolve.
I don't have any comments.
Okay.
So I also support the project, and I only have comments on landscaping. Actually, I do have a comment on the rails, because I think you mentioned the colors be more keeping with the site, the soil, the native vegetation, and you have a switch between the black and the white, and I think you show it as white in your photo montage, which to me doesn't bother me.
Actually, that's the old.
That's the old.
That's the old one. But that doesn't bother me that it's white
It's the-
versus going to black to match whatever
Again,
the
we're
new.
going to work with whatever the board.
So I don't, if my fellow board members have a comment on the color of the rails, but, and then also the color of the brown, to me, the color that you've chosen, yeah. Second one over, I'm not sure what that's going, I think it's on the siding, the hardy plank cedar mill lap siding khaki brown, it seems a little dark to me, a little too soiled. Like, I'd like to see just a little lighter brown, just to kind of lighten it up. other than that, so landscaping, I think that the landscape plan leaves something to be desired. We need more planting, as staff recommended, consistent with the hillside developments around it, consistent with, mature trees, vegetation versus just, a couple of bougainvilleas, and we have a row of bamboo. I understand the bamboo is for screening. You can pick tall, skinny trees instead of bamboo, which can become invasive and is not really found anywhere else in that area. I did visit the site, and I saw that there's a house across the way that has a tropical theme, and they have a lot of palms, and I think you can introduce palms if you want to bring that in, but to just have a row of bamboo doesn't really seem to fit with anything
I don't think
else.
they can even use bamboos in the hillsides.
Because it's
not even a-
So there's a City of Glendale landscape guidelines for hillside development, which lists appropriate landscape materials. Any of those in there for shrubs and trees would be appropriate. Some that aren't listed, I think. And I think, if you did a diverse amount of landscaping, you would even camouflage the decking further, so it wouldn't look like here's a deck, coming out at you. Obviously, you don't want to put the trees in front where the view is. You put the trees to the sides and sort of stagger it so that it creates more of a naturalistic feeling, like it's always been there. Like this deck kind of got inserted into a landscaped area. I'm also concerned with erosion because I noticed that the hillside is very steep, and you can't. I think part of it maybe is eroding away, and there's a retaining wall going up on the lower area, adjacent property, right? So just you want to be concerned about having your property run into their property if a heavy rain comes. So I'm not sure that having two streams is such a great idea. If you did have a stream, I think you'd want it to follow the contours of the landscape and sort of make it like it belonged there, like it was part of the design, the natural landscape of a stream that came off the mountain and ran down through your property. Having them horizontal and kind of pockets here and there doesn't seem to make much sense to me.
Can I interject one thing? The city will be soon introducing, and I think mandating, that landscape plans become composed of California-friendly plants. And that, I believe, is starting in the middle of next month. I want to say
11th.
The 11th?
August 11th.
August 11th. So with that in mind, the landscape plans that are proposed for this should really address
California.
Yeah.
Friendly.
What is that?
Well, that is found on the
Bite you.
what website rather?
Be Waterwise.
Waterwise website.
.org, I believe, or .com.
Mm-hmm. And I suspect most of the plants. Well, the plants on that website it's much more open. I would imagine that most of the plants contained in the city's landscape guidelines are going to be also found on the website, though.
Right. I would imagine they have a more extensive list.
Right.
Well, I just have some suggestions. If you want to keep with, because you have the two existing palms there three existing palms there that are fairly mature, to keep with sort of that style, plus with the bougainvillea that you're introducing, you have plumbago, which is growing in the bottom of the hill. You can bring that in. King palms, if you want to bring in more of the palm tropical look, closer to the home. Jacarandas, homosforums, I think lagostromias are listed in our guidelines. Tablaguyas. These are all more like open, lacy, sort of trees that allow views, but they're also screening. So you have a diverse range of plant material that flowers, it's attractive, it sort of fits in the same style, but also fits in the hillside.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I actually have one question.
You can come up.
I don't disagree with the nature of the plant materials and the intent to meet the city's guidelines as well as good practice in addressing plant types that are indigenous or that are favored towards indigenous and water conservation criteria. What I'm absolutely not clear on is the extent that the landscaping should be addressed relative to the quantity and the areas that are going to be done, because you realize that there are fire issues involved with this, and there are certain planting issues, and there is a certain ratio of the proposed project of about 850 square feet versus the 11,000 square foot lot. And historically, the lot has fairly minimal amount of planting on it. The Mexican palms, I think, are the three main palms that are there. I think those are volunteers that just sort of migrated onto the site through sort of natural currents. They weren't necessarily planted there. So in the absence of having a specific criteria that we need to meet and the limited scope of what the project represents, and again, our initial intent when we presented the project, you didn't have the benefit of seeing the first iteration, we're not trying to use the landscaping to eliminate the visual appearance of the decks. Not that that's not a bad thing or a good thing, but that we're just trying to help integrate the proposed deck configuration into the context of the hillside. And so the issue of the quantity of materials is important because it's not per se the intent of the application to do a landscaping project, but it is to integrate landscaping into the development of that small particular portion of the site. So if there is some guideline in terms of how that would work, it's not so much the type of material, the appropriateness of certain materials, and the way the project should be executed that I'm concerned about, but it is the quantities of materials and the areas that we specifically want to address there. And again, stability of the slope, fire issues, and meeting the water conservation guidelines are all things that are going to impact on success or the nature of what we can propose.
Yes, and
So I'd use as much help as we can do this to address, because again, there are city guidelines, but they are not specific to this type of project. If this was a major redevelopment, I think we could apply those to the context of what we're talking
Right.
about.
The
a little
only,
bit
I think,
more
our concern is
efficiently.
that the trees and the planting that is being done, I think we just have to make sure that it's consistent with the hillside guidelines and the fire department's requirements.
Again,
So
because
as
there
long
were,
as that-
and again, I appreciate the comments, I'm just trying to be as focused on what it is we need to address if there is
No,
anything
I
that's
understand that,
important.
but as part of the landscape requirements that you brought the landscape plans, I think as long as the plants that you're proposing, which bamboo is not part of the...
Oh, and that's clearly not an oversight, and I wasn't aware of
yeah,
that specific issue.
So
He's also talking about where it's going to be and how much of that whole backyard.
But that's why we asked for a
So-
landscape plan, so that we know, we could see it and say, okay, yeah, they get it, they're putting this here, they're putting that there, a tree here, a tree there, some shrubs around this
I think
area.
what we'll do is rather
Okay,
than going and have a discussion back and forth, we'll just go ahead and show you what we want to see, and let's just call
Basically
it
what
that.
I'm saying,
Yeah. Okay.
in a way of saying, yeah, I am aware of what your issues are, but
Right.
if you could give some specific
Okay.
focus, I think that will help make it something that we can address.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So if you want to go ahead and,
Well, I mean, it's sort of, you hire a landscape architect to give you what we're trying to help you with, is it basically, yeah, to have some shrubbery at the bottom to screen and reduce the massing of the siding. And then when you have the bamboo, obviously it's a privacy issue for you. So in here, this area, to put in larger trees that are more of a height and more openness. But they don't have to be in a row, and they can be, here, there,
well,
whatever.
the point is that bamboo is not allowed in
Well, I'm just saying that instead of this, but instead of putting trees in a row or
Right.
one tree, and I'm not here to design to say put this tree here or put that tree there or put 5 trees in this sort of pattern. But that's up to the landscape architect that they hired.
Well, if we looked at the upper topo, how much of the backyard are we expecting them to landscape?
And that's the direction they want.
I think it should probably have some ground cover for stability, but they're obviously not going to do the whole yard.
Grass is on it that's holding it in. No.
I'm saying if we looked on that topo, take it to just the dark topo line right after the deck, maybe? To the limit of, I'm asking, where do we limit?
I don't think that it's necessarily to need to landscape that whole top area, because that's sort of what it is now. It's held for all its time.
I think that's where they need the direction.
Yeah.
Well, I think that to defend their design, and I'm not going to talk for them, and we can have them come and talk, but I think the areas that I would feel, the common sense would be is the areas that the tallest and the largest exposed retaining condition, I think they're addressing that, and there's a section here that is exposed, they're putting that in. And then on the other side, which is here, which is probably here, and it's covering that. But I think my issue would be is more of using bamboos where, if they want to plant something, which I don't think we even asked for this. I think that's something that the architect has put.
He's trying to do, it's probably
I think
some
it's more
screening.
of a screening. So I
Screening
think it's
rather
more of a sensitive to the. You haven't placed a card, and the section has been closed. So unless
I can respond.
Well, I think that you're right. We didn't
You know
ask
what I
for,
mean?
we didn't ask for screening. We didn't ask for something along the edge. We just had something that kind of minimizes the massing of the deck.
So I think the tallest portions of the project has been addressed, and I would like a comment on the bougainvilleas, of the usage of that and how much of a screening it will give with the palette that they have picked, and is it going to be a small little piece of shrubbery here that is going to take another 10, 15 years to grow?
15 gallon, it's fairly large size.
Okay,
and they will grow fast, and it provides you a lot of mass and color. But it's one material, and so the material, if a bug came and destroyed one bougainvillea, it's probably going to take all of them out. Wintertime, it doesn't look the greatest, so, wintertime, you're kind of looking at something that's not so hot looking.
Okay, well, I think we understand. So I think the direction we need from you is you're saying that we use a different palette or mix of different
I'm
palettes.
just saying, add in some more, add another shrub or two into the mix. Okay. But keep the bougainvillea. This works for me. You can maybe mix it in a couple more places. And I would just say that, if this is an issue for you for privacy, that to use deciduous or evergreen trees to wherever you're trying to achieve privacy, it's going to be evergreen trees that are more keeping in the hillside, such as the ones that are in the guidelines or that I rattled off. And then on this side, I think they have mature trees, but if you wanted to, I think it'd be nice to introduce more either shrub or a tree, I guess to have the height minimized, to put a couple of trees in this area to kind of...
what if you said within 10 feet of the project, around the three sides?
Within 10 feet, you're probably on the other property.
The property. You are 10 feet.
I'm just saying, when you look at their site, I'm just trying to somehow...
The hillside doesn't make it necessary.
You need to speak up on the mic.
The configuration at the site in detail doesn't really render it necessary to put planting on that, on the left side of the site. It has to do with the geometry and where the decks hit the ground. It's just not in the adjacent parcel sort of overly.
Well, let me then. Okay.
And let me just, because listening in on your conversation, I think we're starting to see at least a general consensus from what has been offered in terms of critique, as well as what other members of the board is what I'm familiar with is we do show the bougainvillea as one of the planting materials that's recommended there, and I think in terms of the robustness of the bougainvillea and the nature of its screening capacity, as well as there are a number of other plants that are on the site that are indigenous, let's call them, or native, they're there, and they're not intended to be eliminated. So there are other materials on the site that will be sustained. There is no soil on the site currently, so whatever we plant, we have to augment the current ground condition with soil. It's basically rock face, unless it's been planted or unless it's been
so how are you going to
improved. Well, we go in and we create planting beds in the appropriate places, and so those are going to be chiseled out of whatever material is in there now. So it's not like we can't put lawn in because we don't have any soil there. It's too steep. It's just not appropriate to do it. So what we're looking to do is to create individual spot plantings that are appropriate for retaining the hill, that are appropriate for screening the component that we've recommended, as well as the water conservation and fire issues. The one issue that, and I think we're all in agreement with that, is that the concern or the possibility of putting in a screening material along in the upper corner there on the right side. Bamboo is inappropriate. We can go with trees or a combination of materials, and I think there should be a diversity in the materials.
I love bamboos, but
we can do the same scale of planting and just diversify and put in, let's say, units of three different materials that are consistent with the idea of having bougainvillea, which has a certain color and texture, as well as a few others, and make it kind of have an overall theme that is
Okay.
more natural.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so in general, we're all in agreement, and as a general comment, if you can give a little bit of a direction of specific direction, or rather you want to read through the,
Just make a motion from them. Add it on the next.
if you want to make a motion with the,
We approve with the condition that the landscaping plan is retooled with the suggestions that the board has made to keep the planting more consistent with the hillside, augment the bougainvillea with some other material.
Second that?
The staff had recommended a condition to remove the bamboo, and assume the board would
Yes.
Yes.
sustain that.
Now, also, Mr. Garagos mentioned about ground cover. Should there be one for this project, such as maybe lantana or?
Well, they're kind of achieving that with the bougainvillea, if it's going to cover a lot of space. And they have growing, they have plants growing on the site already, then I'm looking at that. But yeah,
That's fine.
I guess a consideration to make sure that there's appropriate ground cover for erosion control.
Yeah, the general note.
So then the condition really address the landscaping, that it needs to be more varied and more robust palette that provide different textures. And
You can just add another plant material to mix in with the bougainvillea,
just one more type,
one or two. let's
one
put
or
that.
two more type.
And to make sure that the planting, well, how do you say that? There's an erosion control plant that addresses erosion control. If it's not currently there.
Ground cover planting sufficient to address erosion control?
Yeah, if
How's that
it's
sound?
not currently on site.
Okay, so
roll call, please.
that was a motion by Mr. Garagos and a second.
No,
motion
switched.
Motion by Mr. Kai and a second by Mr. Garagos. This will be roll call. Mr. Baladian,
Yes.
Mr. Kai,
Yes.
Mr. Garagos,
Yes.
and Chairman Malakian.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
All right, we have one set of minutes to approve.
I think we have a couple of comments on that.
Okay.
On the, Mr. Baladian picked that up.
It's the colors.
On the south, the project 701 South Central facade, under the consideration, in line number 3, I think that was a condition, not a consideration. Exclude color variations in lighting system. Blue color is fine, should put a limitation of brightness. Consider lighting level to match lead recommendation. And that was a condition, that was not a consideration.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Second page,
Yeah.
under the
Three.
consideration number 3.
Was a condition instead.
Okay, number 3 should be a condition.
Condition. Yeah.
Okay. You can review the tape, make sure that
If it wasn't, then what, I mean, if it wasn't clear, I think it needs to be one single color. I mean, I completely agree with the condition.
I think we were clear
well,
that
it sounds the way it's phrased here. Exclude color variations in lighting system. Blue is fine, but should put a limitation on the brightness. That to me is not a condition, just based on how it's phrased.
We don't, I was very specific. I didn't want it to look like a Las Vegas strip
No,
kind
I'm
of
sorry.
thing with
that-
all these colors.
The
of
way
going
that's
back and-
written, to me, reads as a condition.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's where it says consider lighting levels to match lead.
And that was the some sort of, because we couldn't really tell the level of the
Yeah,
brightness. And I
okay.
think Stephanie brought this this condition up, saying that there is a level that it's being specified under the lead.
Okay, so
requirements.
you concurring that you were calling that's a consideration?
I believe,
Okay.
condition.
Okay, because it says consider lighting levels. So the first two sentences in those considerations really read to me like conditions. Exclude color variations. Blue is okay, but there are limitations on the brightness. The last sentence,
Well, see,
consider lighting.
before you read the last sentences, blue color is fine, should put a limitation on brightness, and the question came, how do you determine the brightness and what level of the brightness, and then the last sentence came as a consider,
Right.
as the
That's
previous
related
sentence.
to this.
All right, exactly.
So I remember that conversation. You were concerned about, the board was concerned about limiting how bright the lighting would be, and suggested the lead standard might be a way of measuring that.
Exactly.
Or,
So,
Okay.
so I think that needs to be adjusted. I don't know if I should adjust that and then sign it, or should we just,
Why don't we adjust it?
okay.
And then,
Anything else? Have you guys come across anything else?
I need minutes.
Oh, you didn't get the minutes?
For
Were
July
you here?
16th.
I don't think we.
sorry?
July 16th.
I don't think so.
we don't have July 16th.
Okay, then.
No, she wasn't here. It was Carter's
Yeah, I
last.
wasn't here July 2nd. I just saw July 16th on the approval of minutes.
Right, yeah. Sometime we need to get the agenda out before sometimes the minutes are really done. So
Make a motion that we approve minutes from July 2nd with the notations.
Second.
there's a second.
No, we're going to revise it before.
my understanding from the chair would like to see the minutes again before.
No, we can sign it. I mean, I
Yeah, I thought you
Okay.
said we could just sign it. Is that what you said? I misunderstood.
Well,
think it
no,
would be
I can
better-
revise it.
I
He
think it
can
would
sign
be-
it after I revise
Right.
it.
Okay, so
We're
then,
not voting
so
on
then
it.
let's go
No.
ahead and make the motion, and then once it's revised, I'll sign it.
Okay. Well, then I hold on my motion.
Okay, I'll second it.
Okay, a motion was made to approve the minutes with that one correction. Roll call. Mr. Garagos.
Yes.
Mr. Baladian.
Yes.
Sakai.
Abstained, I was not here.
Mr. Malisi.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
And I think we're adjourned. Thank you.
Left.